here we are with the try on. I'm just holding my microphone, so I do hope the sound's okay for you. I didn't want it to be distracting and in the way of the sweater, even though the hair does cover a lot of it. Just move that out the way. Okay, so I've not blocked it. As you can see at the moment, well, I hope you can see, the sleeves are a little bit shorter than I would like, so I'm hoping they will relax. I'm also hoping the neckline will relax. And in general, I'd just like the whole sweater to relax a bit because it is quite stiff at the moment. But there we go. I'll just show you the back as well. Move my hair out the way so you can see where the neckline is. Overall, I'm pretty pleased. It's turned out pretty well. Like I say, the sleeves are just a little bit shorter than what I would like, which is always concerning before you block a garment, but I know they do normally grow. Alpaca is notorious for growing, and I know this is a wool alpaca blend, but I'm hopeful that what I would say is that this Drops Lima I love knitting with, which I told you all about, but I can just feel a bit of a prickle around the neck. Hopeful again that blocking will soften it, and it's, you know, over time that will disappear. So I'm gonna block it now. Apologies that it's not really in the right outfit to show you with, but it is a good length. It's just actually hitting on my hip bones. Well, midway on my hip bones, I would say, at the bottom of my stomach, if that makes sense. So I think it's going to be a really good length for winter. It cinches in a bit at the bottom. That's probably my bind off as usual, but it's not enough to bother me. I think I did a half stretchy on the bottom. Yeah, I did a half stretchy bind up on the bottom, so there still is a bit of give. I can get it on and off without any problems. And I'm thinking with this being more for a winter garment, then it will actually keep in the warmth with it being a bit more snugger around that area. And yes, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually block, and I will record the process so that you can see what I do when I block. Now, I think officially when you're blocking, so all blocking means is essentially washing and pinning your knitted garment or crocheted garment and pinning it out to dry. The idea being that if you have met gauge and knit to a certain size in the pattern, you can then pin it out to the measurements in the pattern. Now, as we all know, our knitting is very, very individual, and you might not necessarily have your top at the exact measurements. Some yarns will give, as I've said. What I like to do is, rather than being strict on measurements, I look at the garment laid on the mats and I pin it to how I feel looks best. So the fabric's not too stretched, and I just bear in mind, like with this one, I want to make sure I'm getting a little bit of extra length out of these sleeves, and I'm hoping the neckline will open up. But I'll show you all that as we go along. So the first part of the process of blocking this will be to soak it in some wool wash and lukewarm water, and I generally soak for about half an hour. And then I will come back to you and I will show you the next stages. I have put some water and wool wash into my strucket. You don't need a strucket, but they are absolutely fantastic for this job. And I'm just going to put my sweater in now, and I'll just gently push it down to make sure it's submerged in the water. You don't want to agitate it at all because that can felt wool. This is warm-ish water, I'd say. Okay, I'm going to leave that now for 30 minutes, and then I will come back and squeeze all the moisture out. And here we are. I have soaked and squeezed out all the moisture from my no frills, and I'm just now going to, let me just check where the back is. Yep, that's the back. I'm going to pin it all out on my blocking mats, and then I will show you what it's like once I have done that. Now, I'm not a perfectionist with this, as I said before, and what I do try to do is I make sure that none of the stitches, when I am pinning this out, are twisted or overstretched or looking too funny, because if you overstretch your garment when you're pinning it, it can dry in a position where you have some funky shapes. So you do need to make sure that your hemline is looking good, especially, and your neckline, and you need to make sure that so what I was saying before I was rudely interrupted is that if you pin it out and say the bottom hem isn't straight, it can dry that way. So you do need to be careful when you're pinning it that you're making it look as good as possible. And what I do often do, because it can shrink back a bit as it's drying, I will readjust my pins throughout the drying process. And there we are, that's all pinned out. I haven't had to put many pins in this garment. What I would say is that if you only have one pack of the blocking mats, as I do, I sometimes do feel I could do with a couple of sets, but it's pinned out as much as it needs to be. I've got the collar pinned out here. I've got the hem pinned out that I'm happy with, but I will keep my eye on that in case it shrinks back. And I've just got a couple of pins in the cuff. Like I say, I don't need to do it aggressively. I just want the cuff to be a bit wider rather than so snug. And yeah, hopefully in the next few days this will dry. Probably pop it out in the garden tomorrow, but I don't want to do that tonight because it might rain. Well, here we are. This is the final showing of the no-frill sweater. It's been blocked, as you will have seen in the earlier videos, and yeah, I am over the moon with how it's turned out. As I say, there's still a tiny bit of prickle on the neck, which hopefully over time and wear that will soften. Other than that, I've got it against my skin, and it's very tolerable. I can't say that word. I can tolerate it against my skin anyway. There's just the odd place where I can feel a slight prickle, and I'm sure over time that will lessen, like with my pole sweater. The sleeves are now the perfect length. They have grown a bit. There's two things that, or maybe three things I would try and do if I did this sweater again to perfect it even further. So I do think, because of the excess of fabric around here and under here, I could potentially get away with going down a size, but I probably would then have to still do the sleeve size the same. And the other thing is my bind off, although it's a lot better because I think I did a half. Did I do a half stretchy? I think I did a half stretchy. It's a little bit tight, and I would prefer it if it wasn't, and the ribbing does cinch in a bit, and I think that's because of my tight bind off. So I would make sure to do a full stretchy bind off on the bottom edging. And also I think for me, for my body shape, I could do with a couple of extra short rows. Now, I've never modified the short rows in a pattern, but I do think though if I was to try it, this pattern would be ideal for trying out adding a few extra short rows in. And I think that's something I do need to look into, because it is something that has been a running theme in a few of my patterns. I obviously need my necklines to be slightly lower. Other than that, I think this sweater has turned out pretty perfectly. Love the colour. And I think this will get, as like my Paul sweater, which if you want another type of sweater that's a different construction and take you to the next level, the Paul sweater is fantastic by PetiteKnit. That's another one for you to try if you want a recommendation. I have made that, and it gets a lot of wear. I love it. I love the fit of it. Yeah, and the yarn that I used, didn't like it when I was knitting it. Didn't think the quality was great, and it is a woolly knit cone. It was the merino from Woolly Knits. And now, after wearing that sweater for some time, I'd highly recommend that pattern, and I'd highly recommend that yarn. You just need to keep an eye out and be mindful that sometimes the yarn can be uneven, and you know, in hindsight, I would probably cut those that I had a couple of sections in that garment where I had that in, and I would cut them out and do it again. But yeah, that's a bit of a side tangent. But this garment, I would definitely knit it again. It was a very easy knit. I hope you enjoyed doing it if you were knitting along and that you've got some value. Let me know in the comments what you're going to be knitting on next, what your next challenge will be, and also what you'd like to see me knitting on next for these knit along things. I know I've been talking about probably going to do a summer top next, and I've got the yarn waiting in my basket. But yeah, if you have knitted through this whole sweater and it's your first sweater or your 30th sweater, thank you for following along. I really appreciate you all. And do you know what? It's been so wonderful to hear people who've found my videos useful. I do try to take it back to the very basic level so that anybody at any point in their knitting journey can hopefully follow along. And yeah, it's been a real pleasure putting out these videos, and I hope that you'll follow along in the next ones. Thank you so much for being here. Bye.